I think that ketamine provides window to our authentic self without all of the external things that we have developed to deal with external stressors in the outside world. And if you will, I think, allows you to kind of get to the top of the mountain and see the view from the top of the mountain, to recognize what is real and valid and possible.
Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. Oh, do I have a good one for you today. You know, I love bringing on guests who get it, right? People who aren't just like doing the work, but are actually living it, breathing it, showing up in this space with so much heart, so much authenticity. And that is exactly my guest for you today, Dr. Sarah Coakley. Now, Sarah's story is interesting because she comes from a very clinical world of anesthesia, and she landed in the ketamine treatment space, which, as you'll hear her tell you herself, was a much bigger paradigm shift for her than she really expected. This conversation is all about what was actually needed for real transformation, because as much as we love ketamine, let's be real. Just showing up for an infusion or an IM session or whatever way you're consuming ketamine and calling it a day, that's not the move. Sarah dropped this amazing soup analogy in this episode that I just really loved because it is so good. So imagine that you're making a soup. If you just throw in one ingredient, let's start with the first ingredient, water. Like if you just heat up water in a pot for 2 hours, do you have soup? No, you just have warm water, right? So ketamine is one amazing ingredient, but if it's the only ingredient in the pot, do you have a soup? No, you need other ingredients to make a soup. You need some seasoning, you need vegetables, you need some depth of flavor. All of that, by the way, is integration. Sleep, movement, nourishment, connection, actual support, actual guidance. That's what makes the soup rich. That's what makes it satisfying and transformative. And think about it this way too, right? Like you need all of those ingredients working together. You need them to mix their flavors together, right? So that's exactly what we dive into today. We dive into what actually happens when you work with the neuroplasticity that ketamine gives you. Instead of reinforcing old patterns, how to make new ones, or the importance of making new ones. We're talking about the missing piece in most ketamine treatments, and spoiler alert, yes, it's integration. Hello. We talk about why so many people come to ketamine as a last resort and how we can change that. And we talk about the power of retreats and removing yourself from your daily context so you can actually see what needs to shift. So I really loved what Sarah said about ketamine giving people this mountaintop moment of lifting you out of the noise of your daily life so that you can finally see things clearly. And when I tell you that she has witnessed some wild breakthroughs in her clinics, like full body chills. So whether you're curious about ketamine, deep in the integration process, or just here for the great metaphors, this episode is a must listen to. Grab your tea, take me for a walk. Let's get into it. And real quick before you do, if you or someone you know is a veteran, first responder, or frontline medical worker, Dr. Coakley has some incredible discounts and programs that help make this treatment more accessible. And we have more on that at the end of the episode. All right, let's do this. Welcome to the podcast. So happy you're here. And as I've mentioned, we start every single podcast conversation interview with the same question. If you can go back and tell you before you started all this anything, what would you tell her?
I think I would tell her that there is much more of a connection between the clinical side and the more natural medicine side of ketamine treatment than I think I was prepared for coming from a clinical background.
Amazing. So you would tell her that there's more pieces to the puzzle than just the clinical.
Correct.
So Was she very like science minded, clinical focused? How did at that time in your life, how did you feel about some of the more holistic integration pieces of ketamine treatment?
So I'm a DO by training. So we have, I think, a more open-minded view of some non-traditional treatment options outside of just Western medicine. So I think I come to it with a flexibility and open mind about it. But as an anesthesiologist that treats people with IV medications all day, it was a disconnect to see that there was a deeper interaction with the medicine than just we were using it in what we were using it for in anesthesia practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that a lot with the work that I do with, preparation and integration for ketamine is that there's a lot of people coming from the traditional model where, something is given to you and it heals the whole thing, right? Where it's like, okay, you have this issue, these symptoms, here's the thing, and it kind of cleans that up. Whereas what I always tell clients is that, ketamine is not going to fix your problems, but it's going to make you fixing your problems accessible, possible, and it's going to create a more open mind to different solutions that you don't have right now when you're operating in the place of, tunnel vision stress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It provides, like you said, the access to address things that are typically covered in our psyches, I guess, that we spend a lot of time trying to keep under wraps. So there's a lot to go to peel all those layers back.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to see psychedelic medicine, ketamine therapy kind of being that bridge that, if you walk into a hospital, for example, or any medical clinic, right? You have different rooms for different treatments, right? You have the body has been in this Western medical model has been kind of dissected. It's like, oh, you have, a heart issue, you go to that doctor, you have a gut issue, you go to that doctor. And with ketamine, it's kind of like, yes, we'll put this coat, right? This fresh coat of possibility, but really treating everything in one place. And that's, what we're talking about when we talk about integration, right?
Right. So integration within yourself in terms of using the treatment session for being able to just experience the treatment session and then having an opportunity later to work on maybe what came up and process through that with another provider, like a therapist, coach, someone that can help kind of unwind some of those things. So just coming and getting the medicine and going home is possible, but it's not really using it to its potential.
Agreed. And there is actually a little bit, I always want to be careful with how I say this because I never want to inspire or instill fear. But the truth is, we have access to neuroplasticity, which is the ability to change your brain. We have access to that at any time, at any point, and ketamine increases it. So now you have this open window of heightened neuroplasticity. And if people don't know how to work with that heightened neuroplasticity, and what they do is they, you mentioned in the document, right? Like sleep, nutrition, time in nature, body movement. What else can we throw in here? Community, right? Interpersonal relationships. And so if someone has this open window of, oh, I have the ability to cut those grooves in deeper. But what they do is if they don't know that and they go home and they're doing the same thing, sleeping the same way, eating the same way, making the same choices, it's a big disservice because then they're digging those grooves in deeper into the undesirable state.
Exactly. So they're reinforcing what has been a pattern for them already, which clearly isn't working for them. And perhaps even, working against yourself and making it more difficult to grow.
Definitely. Yeah. It's reinforcing, undesirable behavior that's not helping them. That's caused them to come to this place of a very experimental therapy, right? It's still we're seeing a lot of benefits. There's so many studies about how psychedelic medicine is really so much more positive and helpful than traditional medicine and the things that we're studying. And it's only helpful if you actually make those changes, if you actually do that work outside of the therapy, to the infusion therapy or the IM therapy or whatever, the administration is, the work outside of that to reinforce change.
Absolutely. And I always tell my patients, people come by their things honestly, right? Like, we've all developed whatever coping tools we did because it was helpful. It did serve some purpose at some time, but usually it's become dysfunctional and is not serving them anymore at this point. But because it's a pattern behavior, it's hard to find something that serves them better at this point. And that's what ketamine can provide, is that opportunity for an off-ramp to discover a different route.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm curious if you see this too. I see this with a lot of the people that I work with, where because ketamine is so for a lot of people, outside of their norm. I really like that leveling playing field of ketamine, because it's legal, because it's accessible. People that wouldn't otherwise come to psychedelic medicine are coming to ketamine. And so I'm seeing people really want to commit to making their life different on the other side, right? To go through, entering an experimental therapy, going through all of the sort of soft skills that come with it, right? Like entering the unknown, learning how to navigate uncertainty, confronting whatever they've been, as you said earlier, has been hidden underneath. And it's to come out on the other side the same way that you go in. Some people are actually really feeling motivated to change, because I'm not going through all of that and coming out the same person I came in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There is a significant opportunity for dramatic change. But it does require, it requires patients taking responsibility for their own healing, essentially, and being an active participant in that process.
Amen. One of my favorite, I have so many like one-liners that I live and work by. And one of them is, it works if you do.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta do your part. It's like the ketamine will make doing your part so much more accessible. I mean, I'm curious, like, if you have some anecdotes of how people walk out of their treatment feeling that you can kind of like notice them being more inspired to make a different choice or take a different action.
I mean, I think probably one of the most dramatic was a patient who was in a abusive, dysfunctional relationship, and was able to recognize why that wasn't serving her anymore. And it just became very obvious that the next move was getting a divorce. And it was very clear. There was no more questioning herself about it. She saw the path and followed through with it, and is on a much better place with her children and her family. So that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those stories too. I have my own theories of what the difference is, because I've seen, I've worked with people that have been in, 15, 20-year marriages that weren't working, and through ketamine, they come out on the other side and they go, okay, it's clear. I know I need to leave this relationship. I have my own theories of why it becomes clear with ketamine, but I'm curious if you have a theory to offer.
I think that ketamine provides a window to our authentic self, without all of the external things that we have developed to deal with external stressors in the outside world. And if you will, I think, allows you to kind of get to the top of the mountain and see the view from the top of the mountain, to recognize what is real and valid and possible. And I think provides people something tangible to look at and say, okay, I understand that is part of me and that's where I want to go. Instead of, so many people have been in their depression or anxiety or PTSD for so long that it's hard for them to recognize themselves even. And so I think it gives them kind of stripped down version, so they can make choices that serve them.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. I like the image of being on top of the mountain and seeing clearly. That has a lot to do with our physiological response to stress, right? So stress is narrow focus, and when we're in narrow focus, we can't see the forest from the trees, right? We're in the trees and we can't see it, and so. Which is great namesake to the clinic that you run, right? Summit, right? Like you get to the top and you can see more clearly, and it opens up, and it's not just you can see clearly what's happening, but you also have the ability to access different parts, right, of your brain. And so your share just now is so beautiful. What I reminded me of is Albert Einstein, right? We cannot solve the problem with the same thinking that created it. And so many people are stuck in that, like you were saying, they're stuck in their depression. They don't even recognize themselves. And ketamine lifts them up, right? That's the beautiful part of the dissociative property of ketamine, is it lifts you up and out. And I love that, because I always talk about it lifting you up and out, but now I have okay, and it drops you on top of the mountain and you can see out clearly. And yeah. And it gives you those access, right? I think a lot of people, I think it's really common that for us humans, because we're tribal beings and because we live in, we're hardwired to live in community and connection, a lot of times with difficult life issues, like a difficult marriage, for example, we start sourcing information from other people, and then we have all of this noise, right? And it really is, the ketamine is taking us out, and it's taking us to that, like you said, that authentic version of ourselves, where it's just like, okay, I know what needs to happen, right? It's taking us out of the noise of the 5% conscious mind, bringing us down to the 95% subconscious, where things are not as chaotic, they're not as stressful. There's an inner knowing that is really really beautiful to observe people connect with.
Absolutely. And I think it's also an opportunity to allow people to feel things that they are unaccustomed to. So for a lot of people that are suffering with anxiety and PTSD, there's a constant hypervigilance. There's the constant feeling of fight or flight. And so when our body is in that fight or flight mode, there's no, every part of our body is trying to survive. So it arrests the parts that are trying to grow and nourish and build. And instead, it's just constantly trying to defend. So this can give your body an opportunity to get out of that fight or flight. Actually, people can feel a sense of calm. They can feel emotions that they can't remember feeling. Joy, peace, things that have been elusive to them for so long that they're not even sure they have the ability to access that emotion. And so giving them that opportunity to say, yeah, it's in there, is amazing. And to see the look on their face, and when they, when they're like, oh my gosh, I felt joy for a little while, and I forgot what that feels like. It's incredible to witness.
Yeah, I have chills everywhere because I've connected with a lot of people that also have that moment of lightness of wow, I haven't felt this thing in years, and not even being consciously aware that they hadn't felt joy or peace or calm or satisfaction, whatever it is, and coming back and think and reconnecting with a part of themselves that was locked away. And not just that, having that part, right? The more favorable emotions of joy, love, peace, happiness, etc. Now with the way that ketamine kind of drops the walls, right, to different parts of the brain, and it's like that part is now talking to the despair, the hopelessness, the pain, the depression, whatever you want to call it, and those two are having a conversation maybe for the first time ever, and the joy is saying like it's okay, like you can come over here. It's like such a beautiful like subconscious rewiring.
It really is. And it's funny that you mentioned chills because when my patients come in, after starting their series, usually I can tell when they walk in if they're starting to respond. Like there's a visual difference. Like when I see them, I'm like, oh, things are changing.
Yeah.
And, I won't say anything and I'll kind of ask them how things are going and they'll start telling me. And I still, like, every time one of my patients tells me they're starting to respond, I get goosebumps. I'm just like, yay, it's working.
Exactly. And the way that it's working too. And I've had those moments too with clients in sessions where they show up and they look visibly lighter, and I don't say anything. I just wait for them to start, pointing it out on their own. And I'm like, well, what do you think the change is? Like, what do you think is different? And they're like, I just like, I'm spending more time outside, or like, oh, I'm just like reconnecting with old friends. I'm having more conversations with other people. I'm spending less time on my phone. I just like, I decided to clean out my closet. And it's like, that's what it is. It's like those things that ketamine makes possible, right? The ketamine's not going in and changing your life. It's not making better choices with how you move, how you sleep, how you eat, how you, arrange your space. But it's all of a sudden you're noticing things. You're like, oh, you know what? Those clothes have been in that closet for a really long time. It's a good time to clean that out and get a little lighter. And then it's right, like as within, so without, right? So you make your outside lighter, then the inside feels lighter. And it's this feedback loop because then the inside feels lighter. You continue with the ketamine, it gets lighter. And you're like, wait, I want the outside to reflect what I'm feeling inside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gives you access to all of those tools that all of your providers, your primary care providers are always saying, get outside, get some sunshine, interact with people, stay off your phone, all of those things, that were not possible. You're like, oh yeah, I do feel like going for a walk. That would be nice, And so it starts to snowball these things and you're more functional.
Absolutely. And it's also, I always like to express a lot of loving compassion because I've personally been in, depressive circles or anxious circles. And the way that these states work, like subconsciously, is that they are loops, right? They're loops that we get stuck in. That's why people say they're stuck. You can't be stuck because our cells are turning over. The sun is, changing, like the nature is not stopped. So if we're feeling stuck, it's really that we're just going and making the same choices over and over. And I know that it doesn't matter how long those choices, that round merry-go-round's going, it feels heavy, it feels hard, and it feels big. And so to think, oh, like I have a big problem, 5-minute walk around the block is not going to fix my big problem, right? But then as the lightness of the ketamine kicks in, it's like, actually, it kind of did, right? Like actually a glass of water eliminated like 80% of my issues that in that moment, So it makes it more accessible.
And right. And so we are able to start bringing in like this whole person approach, right? Like, so we're paying attention to hydration. We're paying attention to nutrition, checking our vitamin and mineral levels, making sure we're replacing those. Our diet in the United States is terrible. And our exposure to being outside has been diminished through work, through the pandemic, obviously, and just how we're socializing. So those are things that we can do, to add more fuel to the fire, if you will. And I tell my patients, like, you don't make a soup with one ingredient. Like, I can't just throw ketamine in there and it's going to taste delicious. So you need a little bit of this, you need spice, you need flavor, you need all of those things in order to make a good mental health soup, right? So sleep hygiene, therapy, nutrition, treating things that can be not completely explaining the issue, but contributing, right? So hypothyroidism, things like that, that are easily treated, but also easily overlooked. And one of them is not going to like fix everything, but getting all of those little pieces together with the 5-minute walk and the glass of water and, you know, checking in with close friends, like all of those things together make the positive parts of your day start to outweigh all of the stressor parts of your day.
Absolutely. And then also, right, like what we were saying earlier, you're using that window of neuroplasticity to make different choices, which, you know, we know the compound effect, right? Like it's like the classic analogy of like, you know, you change a flight path 1 degree, you're going to end up in a totally different continent in a few hours, right? Like it really does. It's like a 1% change every day over time makes a whole different life.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, it's important in that broad picture, like you're talking about changes that happen over weeks to months, you know, with treatment, but also like that initial series, right? Like it's not something that we can just do a couple of infusions and there we go, right? It is something that does have to build and you have to work with it and you have to add on the other parts of it to really maximize the potential. And so, yeah, that obviously carries over into life stuff. And we're doing that rewiring, right? Like rewiring our default mode network, like where our brain goes when we're not actively doing something. Changing that to get out of that loop that is self-destructive and feels inevitable.
Exactly. And it feels inevitable because it is inevitable because it's your default mode network. It's what you default to. It's inevitable to default to it. But with ketamine, with proper, you know, integration, with proper care and making different choices and maximizing the neuroplasticity, you can default to something else. And that is, I mean, that's everything. To change your default mode network is to change everything.
Absolutely. Because then we're shifting all of our focus, if you will.
Okay, so we're talking about integration. We're talking about all the puzzle pieces, right? Of dealing with trauma, dealing with also like current life stuff, how you're sleeping, how you're eating, how you're spending your time, things like that. And then I know you work with a beautiful organization, Healing Our Heroes, and you're talking to kind of the way that you talk when you opened up and you said if you went back and told your, you know, past self something, you would say, hey, there's more to this puzzle, right? There's more to this whole thing. I'm wondering, how is that having that conversation with when you're operating in an organization like Healing Our Heroes, which is similar to where you came from, right? Like a very grounded in 3D reality population.
So, well, that's, I think, something that is great about the organization is that it is very open-minded in terms of bringing together different therapies to provide heroes, so veterans, first responders, frontline medical providers, with treatment options, not just the medicine itself, but nutritional therapy stuff, group work, individual work, working with IFS or internal family systems model. So they really have I think they have kind of really hit the nail on the head with bringing all those things together in one space, with the added benefit of being in a retreat space, so away from, you know, all of our normal everyday stressors for a period of time. With when you do this intensive work, it shows really the possibilities for the medication to make profound changes for people. And that's not always accessible, you know, in our lives, to take 4 or 5 days off to go and dive into your mental health. And that's scary for a lot of people too. But I think that's the beauty of this, is that we can find lots of different pathways to figuring out what works for each individual, because each person responds differently to ketamine, like most medications. But it is something that really does need to be individualized to personal circumstances, where they are, medically, and trying to bring all of those pieces together can be overwhelming, especially from a patient perspective. So the retreat situation is nice because that's all taken care of for you. You don't have to go searching for those resources. So figuring out how to expand that out for my entire patient population would be great. Developing a network of resources for all of these things, so you can provide that functionality of the retreat in a real life space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that too with the retreat, right? It's in the word. You retreat from whatever. You retreat from your daily life, your daily stressors, also your daily triggers, right? Because we are such contextual beings that within the context of home life, within the context of work life, we are used to showing up a certain way, right? We are used to ourselves acting, responding, being a certain way. And to go outside of that context opens up a whole neural network of possibility, because you're already a little bit on edge of like, wait, I'm not in my normal context. How do I respond here? And it actually heightens neuroplasticity on top of the ketamine that's already heightening neuroplasticity.
When we were talking about like default mode, right? So with ketamine therapy, we have a possibility to rewire the default mode. And it's essentially making what is our familiar patterns, the way that we respond in certain situations, show up, all of those things. We're seeing another way that's possible. And if we can encourage that enough times, that will become familiar, feel familiar, and the discomfort will start to feel actually uncomfortable. Misery loves company, or they say these things because it's a familiar, like people come back to it because it's familiar. It's that they know and they're comfortable with. So getting this new behavior to feel comfortable, so that that's where you gravitate towards, is part of that whole thing. And giving you that space in the retreat time eliminates a lot of the outside stress, pressures, time factors, all of those things, so that you don't have to fight against that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of the retreat setting too, thinking about how, I always like to tell clients, if they don't know, 95% of our serotonin is produced in the gut. So if we're not eating well, we are limiting how much serotonin is available to us. And it's, the mind body connection is a two-way street, right? So you don't have enough serotonin in the gut because we have a propensity in this country to like have nutrient poor diets. And so then that travels up to how you're feeling. It's, you start changing your habits in that way. In terms of sleep, like if sleep wasn't important, then why would we use sleep deprivation as a form of literally torture, right? It's all of these things start making sense when our mind is open enough to look for solutions, right? I think that's what ketamine really helps for, is that it shifts people from problem perpetuating to solution oriented, just openness.
Absolutely. I think it does. It helps with a lot of the rigidity that we have developed as a coping mechanism most of the time, saying, well, I've always had 5 hours of sleep. I'm fine on 5 hours of sleep. Okay, you've survived on 5 hours of sleep. But is that actually what helps your body? Is that actually and maybe we're in this position because over years that has eaten away at your reserves and everything else, and your body's ability to, renew and heal itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, right, just opening up to possibilities of, okay, you've always been fine, but are you open to trying and seeing what happens if you change it, right? Are you open to just a different avenue? And like I said earlier, I think people coming to ketamine, there's like a subconscious permission slip of like, okay, I'm willing to try anything, right? I'm willing to try ketamine, so therefore I'm willing to try divorce, I'm willing to try cleaning up my diet, I'm willing to try having difficult conversations, I'm willing to try those things that previously I was not open to trying.
And a lot of people end up here as, I mean, they've tried everything else, right? So they come to me saying, this is my last resort. I don't have anything else after this, which is unfortunate. But you're right. Like they're at that place now where they're willing to, you know, they're open to whatever, because they figured out that what they're doing is not working. But I would hope that in the future, we're moving more towards accessing this before we're at the place where this is the last resort. We've tried everything else, you know, and we are looking at it not just for treatment-resistant depression, but perhaps acute trauma and preventing PTSD from establishing itself, preventing, you know, the longer things are around in our bodies, you know, the harder they are to treat. So if we're able to access some of this stuff earlier with people, hopefully we can prevent some of the long-standing issues. So I would hope maybe people can access it earlier on in their treatment options and not just as a last resort.
I mean, that's been my hope for over 6 years as I've been working with subconscious reprogramming and things like that, is wishing that people could come to this kind of therapy, you know, whether it's psychedelic therapy, ketamine therapy, or subconscious reprogramming, but getting down to the root before it's an emergency, right? Before there's all alarms ringing of this isn't working, something needs to change. And the truth is, you know, change is so hard subconsciously. It's very taxing on the subconscious mind to change. And so there is that sweet spot when someone is miserable, when someone is hopeless, when someone is at their last resort, change actually becomes a little bit easier because well, this isn't working. I have to do something different. And the scales kind of tip.
I think it does. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people have to get to that point before they're able to engage with it. And over time, with more education in the population about psychedelic medications, destigmatizing them, I think that will be easier for people to consider it earlier in treatments before they've had multiple medication failures, you know, because it does. Every time you have a failure, it's that much harder to engage in the next treatment. So, you know, you don't know how many shots you're going to get at this before it becomes something critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, what was I going to say about that? Oh, you know, something that I think also not just destigmatizing psychedelic therapy, but destigmatizing mental health. I think the pandemic really helped with that we're having much more open conversations about our mental health. But for the longest time in our, you know, US based society, mental health was something that you sucked up and moved on from. You know, it's like, oh, you don't like this, suck it up, like keep it moving. And I think the pandemic, that like universal stand still, that universal like pause button, really brought a lot of things up for a lot of people. And something that I've been working on with clients a lot is narrowing their window of tolerance. It's good to have a window of tolerance that's open, but for some people, especially veterans, first responders, people that are used to living with PTSD, trauma, and things like that, they actually could use a shorter window of tolerance so that they don't need things to be a level 25 pain before they address it. And they could say, okay, like what you were saying earlier, like, oh, this hurts a little bit. It's acute. It's uncomfortable, and not letting it get to that place of if this doesn't change, I'm at my wit's end, I'm at my maximum of pain, and really narrowing that window. I've noticed it's been helping a lot of people with a history of PTSD.
I think you're right. I think it probably is maybe one of the only good things that came out of the pandemic was, shining a spotlight on the degree of struggle that people have, and opening the discussion about it, and people having the individual realizations that, like, oh, I have a limit and I'm here.
Yeah.
I think most of us were like, oh, I've never been pushed that far. And I think that brought it to, for a lot of people, most people were managing in their everyday, right? And then this extra stressor was put on top, and it just overflowed too many buckets.
Absolutely.
So, it gave people a perspective that they're not untouchable, and everybody is affected in some way, and it's important.
Yeah, and I see a lot of blessings in that way coming out of the pandemic, is that we're getting more honest, and we're getting more real, and we're getting more human, truly.
Yeah. And more tolerant of each other showing up authentically, right? Like, not recognizing that that's a better way to show up than people pleasing or anything else, right? Like, I think people are having more authentic interactions.
I see it, and I pray for even more of it.
Most of the time, I think it's good. I think sometimes it's gone a little off the rails.
As most things, right? It's like the pendulum swings in the opposite direction. Now, some of us are hanging out over here. We got to come back to center. Might swing back towards like people pleasing and overriding needs, and it's going to swing back until it finds its center. And as all things, nothing is permanent, so it's going to change and evolve as anything.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing that I'm very quick to tell my patients and remind them of, is that, we're not looking to hit a finish line. This isn't, we're trying to get to the end of a race and bust a ribbon. You don't finish mental health. It's more of a dance. We're going to go forward. We're going to go back. We're going to turn this way a little and that way a little. And starting to frame it in that way that, oh, I was feeling better and now I'm not again. And feeling like that's a failure. And how did I, what it stopped working, changing that conversation to, I'm responding to what's going on in my life. And today this is going on and that's affecting me in this way. And just having more awareness about how input affects us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I talk about it in my work. Like, you're walking up a spiral staircase. And so you're going to catch the same view, but now you're catching it from a different vantage point, right? Because you can't unsee everything that you saw before. So if it's not working anymore, you're seeing it from the vantage point of like, I had something that was working and now it's not working. So you're already a couple of levels higher. And the idea too is, those things that I call them hooks, right? Like those states that hook you, whether it's anxiety or depression, you're just like, you get hooked by something and now you're on a ride, and it's okay. You're still going to go on that ride. You've been on a depressive merry-go-round for how long, and you just want to get off. Like the body keeps the score, the body remembers. And so it's like, okay, but now can you see it from a few levels up? And now that depressive hook or that anxious hook or that, rumination hook, whatever it is, okay, it used to take you out for how long? 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 20 years, right? And now it took you out for half a day. Like, can we celebrate that as a success?
Absolutely. Right. And that's it, right? Looking at those data points in perspective to see what is changing over time and the amount of functionality that you're gaining back in your life. Like, it's exponential dividends. And hard to quantify, right? But people, it's definitely tangible and they can see it and feel it, but it's hard to say, oh, well, they're this much more functional, or, to put it on a graph is difficult. So reminding people that we have ups and downs with it. And most of it becomes recognizing what state we're in and what our response is to it. And this gives you that opportunity to start saying, oh, this usually sets me off in this way, but I don't have, I know that button's there, but I don't have to push the button. I can just look at the button if I want, and gives you opportunity to make new habits by repeating that choice.
Absolutely. It's where at least 99% of our personal power is, right? Is in that little space between impulse and response, and we make a choice. And even if the choice is to respond how you've always responded, that's totally fine. It's okay. But knowing that it's coming from choice rather than default. Exactly.
And, so recognizing it is the first part of just being aware that you're doing it. That's part of the therapeutic process. So that should be celebrated. Each step has to be celebrated because it's not a finish line, right? They're all turns in the dance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all part of the choreography.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for all that you've shared here today. We'll have all of the links for the Summit Clinic in Denver. We'll have all the links for Healing Our Heroes. You have some generous discounts that you offer for first responders and veterans and things like that. And so we'll have all of that linked in the show notes. Is there anything else that you want everyone to know before we sign off?
I think mostly to keep asking questions of your providers and keep digging for more resources. And, a lot of the providers in this space are working to try to bring as many resources together for people, but recognizing this it's an overall change, not just a 30-day diet or something. So we're trying to make lifestyle changes that hopefully if you are doing that consistently enough, the ketamine is not as necessary in the long run because you're using all of these new tools that you've developed.
Absolutely, yes. And I like what you said earlier of you're making a soup. You need lots of ingredients to make the soup. I love that analogy.
Absolutely. So yeah, ask them, if it's hard, right? Because we don't have a one-stop place to get all of this information yet. But trying to find all those puzzle pieces and, put your puzzle together.
Amen. Thank you so much for your time and your attention here today. It's been a genuine pleasure having you on.
Likewise, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, you're welcome.